Move to the back of the plane, ma'am, or I'll call security. Michael's voice cut through the cabin, sharp with contempt. The 75-year-old black woman remained composed, unaware that everyone was about to witness her true power unfold. The private jet gleamed under the afternoon sun, its sleek design promising luxury for its elite passengers. Inside, the cabin exuded opulence. Plush leather seats, gold accents, and attentive flight crew creating an atmosphere of exclusivity. Among the passengers was Eleanor Johnson, a 75-year-old black woman dressed in a tailored navy pantsuit. Her silver hair was styled in an elegant updo, and despite her age, she moved with remarkable poise, a subtle military bearing evident in her straight posture and observant eyes. A vintage watch with discreet military insignia adorned her wrist. Michael Carson, the lead flight attendant in his early 30s, stood near the entrance. His crisp uniform and meticulously styled hair matched his sharp demeanor. He greeted passengers selectively, warm smiles to some, curt nods for others. When Eleanor approached, his welcoming tone shifted noticeably. "Welcome," he said flatly, barely making eye contact as Eleanor nodded politely. Behind Eleanor sat Colonel Richards, a distinguished white man in his 60s. Michael's demeanor transformed instantly. "Colonel Richards, wonderful to have you aboard again, sir." Rebecca Wilson, a younger flight attendant, observed these interactions with growing discomfort. Her gaze followed Eleanor with a mixture of curiosity and respect, noticing the older woman's dignified bearing and the way she carefully placed a military history magazine in her bag. As passengers settled, Eleanor adjusted her seat with the efficiency of someone accustomed to making herself comfortable in confined spaces, her eyes quietly assessing her surroundings, a habit formed from decades of military vigilance. As the pre-flight preparations continued, Eleanor pressed the call button with a single deliberate motion. Michael noticed the light, but continued arranging drinks for other passengers. After several minutes, Eleanor pressed it again. Michael approached with visible reluctance. "Yes?" he asked, not bothering to hide his impatience. "Could I have a glass of water, please?" Eleanor asked, her voice steady and clear. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. "We'll begin service after takeoff. You'll need to wait." His tone suggested he was addressing a child rather than a woman old enough to be his grandmother. Colonel Richards, seated nearby, frowned at the interaction. "I understand," Eleanor replied evenly, "but my medication needs to be taken before takeoff." Michael sighed dramatically. "Fine, I'll see what I can do." He walked away without another word. When he returned, he practically dropped the water onto her tray table, spilling a few drops. "There you go. Anything else?" His sarcasm was barely concealed. Eleanor dabbed at the spilled water with a napkin. "Thank you. That will be all for now." Michael turned away, muttering just loud enough to be heard. "Shouldn't be traveling alone at your age anyway." As the flight progressed, Michael's treatment of Eleanor became increasingly dismissive. He served other passengers with professional courtesy while barely acknowledging her presence. When distributing refreshments, he consistently served her last, if at all. "Excuse me," Eleanor said as Michael passed by for the third time. "I requested a blanket some time ago." Michael turned with exaggerated patience. "We're quite busy, ma'am. There are younger passengers who need attention first." His emphasis on younger drew uncomfortable glances from nearby travelers. Colonel Richards, observing this exchange, leaned slightly forward. "I believe the lady asked for assistance," he said, his voice carrying the natural authority of someone accustomed to command. Michael's expression tightened. "Of course, sir. Right away." He returned moments later, practically tossing the blanket toward Eleanor's seat. "Here you go, ma'am. Anything else you need help with? The call button works too, the big button with the picture." He spoke slowly, as if addressing someone with cognitive impairment. Eleanor straightened the blanket across her lap with dignity. "I'm familiar with aircraft systems, young man. I've logged more flight hours than you've been alive." Michael scoffed. "Right. I'm sure you have." Rebecca, passing by with a service cart, paused. "Ms. Johnson, would you like some coffee? We have decaf if you prefer." "Regular is fine. Thank you." Eleanor replied with a warm smile. Michael interjected. Maybe we should check if her doctor allows caffeine at her age. Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly, the first crack in her composed demeanor. My doctor recommended I avoid toxic personalities, yet here we are. A few passengers chuckled. Michael's face flushed with anger as he stormed toward the galley, leaving Rebecca to serve Eleanor properly. The tension escalated when Michael returned from the galley with a tray of drinks. Eleanor sat reading her military magazine, a page open to an article about women who had broken barriers in the armed forces. Interesting reading? Michael asked with obvious mockery, reminiscing about the good old days. Eleanor looked up calmly. Actually, yes. History is important, especially the parts that shaped our present. Michael glanced at the magazine. Women in the military? What did they do back then? Type letters and make coffee for the real soldiers. His voice carried through the cabin, causing several passengers to look up in shock. Young man, Eleanor began, her voice low but firm. Those women. Before she could finish, Michael abruptly shifted his tray, accidentally spilling orange juice across Eleanor's lap and magazine. Oh my! Michael exclaimed with theatrical concern. I'm so sorry. Maybe your reflexes aren't what they used to be. He offered a napkin with a smirk. Eleanor remained remarkably composed as the cold liquid soaked her clothes. She accepted the napkin without comment, dabbing at the stain with military precision. Colonel Richards immediately stood up. That was completely uncalled for. Michael's face adopted a mask of innocence. It was an accident, sir. These things happen. Eleanor looked directly at Michael, her gaze unwavering. In my experience, she said quietly, very few accidents occur without negligence or intent. The words hung in the air, carrying the weight of a battlefield observation rather than a casual comment. As Eleanor attempted to clean the spreading stain, Rebecca hurried over with additional napkins and a look of genuine concern. Let me help you, Ms. Johnson. I'm so sorry about this. Thank you, dear, Eleanor replied. It's just fabric. I've faced worse. Michael hovered nearby, his feigned concern giving way to impatience. We should move on with the service. Other passengers are waiting. Colonel Richards intervened again. I think you've done quite enough service for now, young man. Michael's expression hardened. With all due respect, sir, I know how to do my job. Eleanor looked up at him. Do you? Because respect seems absent from your service model. Something in Eleanor's calm challenge triggered Michael's anger. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Listen, lady, I don't know who you think you are, but on this plane, I decide who gets what and when. Maybe in your nursing home, you're used to people jumping at your every command, but this isn't a retirement community. Eleanor remained still, her composure almost supernatural. You should choose your next words very carefully. Or what? Michael sneered. You'll call your grandkids? Maybe show me your so-called military ID. He reached toward the magazine. I doubt you've ever wore a uniform except maybe as a secretary. When Eleanor moved to protect her magazine, Michael deliberately pushed against her shoulder. Oops, another accident. The physical contact crossed a line. Eleanor's eyes flashed with a sudden intensity that made Michael take a step back. You have just violated federal law by assaulting a passenger, she stated, her voice now carrying a distinct command presence that filled the cabin, and demonstrated profound disrespect to both your elders and those who have served this country. The cabin fell silent. Eleanor's transformation was subtle but unmistakable. Her posture straightened further, her chin lifted slightly, and her voice took on a quality that commanded attention without raising in volume. I've served under fire in situations that would make your worst days seem like a vacation, she said evenly, and I've commanded respect from people far more intimidating than you. Michael attempted to recover his composure with a dismissive laugh. Right, and I'm the President of the United States. Eleanor calmly reached for her purse and removed a small leather wallet. She didn't open it, merely placed it on her tray table. That would be stolen valor. Young man, another federal offense. Colonel Richards nodded knowingly. I suspected as much. Which branch, ma'am, if you don't mind my asking? Army. 45 years of service, Eleanor replied without taking her eyes off Michael. Rebecca, standing nearby, glanced at her passenger manifest with widening eyes. Eleanor's phone chimed with a message. She glanced at it briefly before looking up at Michael again. Young man, I've spent my life breaking barriers and dealing with people who underestimated me. Today won't be any different. Michael's smirk faltered as uncertainty crept into his expression. Is that a threat? No, Eleanor replied calmly. It's a historical observation. The tense standoff was interrupted when the cockpit door opened. The captain emerged, his face solemn as he scanned the cabin before walking directly toward them. What's happening here? He asked, his professional demeanor barely concealing his concern. Michael quickly adopted a victim stance. This passenger is being disruptive. Sir, I was just trying to... I wasn't speaking to you. The captain cut him off sharply. He turned to Eleanor, his tone shifting to one of respect. Is everything all right, ma'am? Eleanor nodded slightly. A disagreement about appropriate service standards, Captain. Nothing that can't be resolved with proper leadership. The military phrasing wasn't lost on the captain. He straightened almost imperceptibly. I see. The captain turned to Rebecca. The manifest, please. Rebecca handed him the tablet, indicating Eleanor's name. The captain's expression changed immediately, shock followed by recognition. Ms. Johnson, he said, his voice now carrying unmistakable deference. I apologize for the interruption. I've just received an urgent call from corporate headquarters. Michael looked between them, confusion replacing his arrogance. The captain continued, addressing the entire cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we will be making an unscheduled stop. Please remain seated. Colonel Richards watched with growing interest as Michael's face paled. What's happening? Michael demanded. Why are we stopping? The captain ignored him, speaking instead to Eleanor. Ms. Johnson, is there anything you need immediately? Eleanor shook her head. Just professional courtesy for all passengers, Captain. Nothing more. The plane began its descent, leaving Michael increasingly agitated. Someone tell me what's going on, he demanded. Rebecca leaned toward him, whispering urgently, Michael, do you have any idea who she is? Before he could answer, the plane touched down smoothly, and within minutes, a black SUV with the airline's logo pulled up to the aircraft. Two sharply dressed executives boarded the plane, moving with purpose directly to Eleanor's seat. The first, a woman in her 40s, spoke with deep respect. Colonel Johnson, we came as soon as we received your message. Is everything all right? Eleanor nodded calmly. Thank you for your prompt response, Diane. Michael stood frozen, the blood draining from his face as realization dawned. The second executive, a man in his 50s, turned to the captain. Captain Stevens, we'll need statements from all crew members and any passengers who witnessed the incident. Eleanor stood slowly, her movements deliberate. She adjusted her jacket with the practiced precision of someone who had worn a uniform for decades. For those who don't know me, she began, her voice carrying to the cabin without effort. I am Colonel Eleanor Johnson, United States Army, retired. I was among the first black women to achieve the rank of colonel, serving in both Vietnam and the Gulf War. She paused, letting the information settle. I am also the majority owner of this airline, which I purchased after retiring from military service. Gasps and murmurs filled the cabin. Michael swayed slightly, as if physically struck. Colonel Richards nodded with appreciation. I thought I recognized you, ma'am. Your leadership during Operation Desert Storm was legendary. Eleanor acknowledged him with a slight nod before turning her gaze to Michael, who now looked thoroughly shattered. Young man, in the military, we have a saying, rank brings responsibility, not privilege. The same applies to every position of authority. The executives moved efficiently, one taking Michael aside while Diane addressed Eleanor. Colonel Johnson, how would you like us to proceed? Eleanor's response was measured. This isn't just about me. It's about ensuring all passengers are treated with dignity, regardless of age, race, or gender. She turned to Michael. Your behavior today demonstrated prejudice, poor judgment, and a complete lack of professionalism. You are hereby terminated from your position, effective immediately. Michael stammered. You can't. I didn't know. That's precisely the point, Eleanor interrupted calmly. You shouldn't need to know someone's status to treat them with basic respect. The executive guided Michael toward the exit. We'll need your company credentials now. Rebecca approached hesitantly. Colonel Johnson, I want to apologize for not intervening sooner. Eleanor's expression softened. Standing up to authority isn't easy, Rebecca. I learned that over 50 years of military service. But it's never too late to do the right thing. She turned to the captain. I trust this incident will be thoroughly documented and used for training purposes. The captain nodded. Yes, ma'am. I guarantee it. Michael, his arrogance completely evaporated, was escorted from the aircraft. His career ended by his own prejudice. 1 month later, Eleanor stood before a new class of flight attendants during their training at the airline's headquarters. Her presence commanded respect as she addressed the group. The uniform you wear represents not just this airline, but a commitment to serving all people with dignity, she explained. In my decades of military service, I learned that true respect isn't based on rank, race, age, or gender. It's a fundamental right. She paced slowly, her military bearing evident in every step. My experience last month wasn't unique. Many elderly passengers, veterans, and people of color face similar treatment daily. What was unique was my position to do something about it. The trainees listened attentively as she continued. Today, this airline is implementing new policies that emphasize respect for all passengers, with special training on avoiding age, racial, and gender bias. We're also launching a veteran recognition program, acknowledging those who served our country. As Eleanor concluded her presentation, a young black woman raised her hand. Colonel Johnson, what advice would you give us about standing up against prejudice? Eleanor smiled. Remember that dignity isn't diminished by others' perceptions. Hold your ground, just as I did through decades of service, and know that your actions today shape tomorrow's reality. This story reminds us that dignity isn't defined by others' perceptions, but by our own strength and character. Colonel Johnson's experience shows how prejudice still exists, but also how composure and self-respect can triumph over discrimination. Have you ever faced judgment based on your age, race, or appearance? How did you respond? Share your experiences in the comments below. Has someone ever underestimated you, only to later realize your true worth? We'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories of justice and respect.